Alrighty, so I had an interesting idea for something that I wanted to sort of do where I want to compare the teams that I have set on my account versus the teams that are set on like a whale account. So shout out again to the guy who's been letting me sort of mess around with his sort of crazy stacked account with like 13 plus million box CC and everything. So we'll start with mine, of course. I have a lot more context, of course, that I can give you for what each team is and everything. I'll try to keep it kind of short and simple, so that way it's not me going into too much detail and I'm not spending an incredible amount of time or anything. But I wanted to go through all of the adventure teams, all of the deathmatch teams, all of the PvP teams. I guess I can show you the Brawl stuff if you're interested. I know a lot of people don't mess with Brawl, but yeah, we'll try to go through them one by one. Kind of quickly, but yeah, before we hop in, I do want to say, if you're new to the channel or anything like that, feel free to subscribe, because that helps me out quite a bit. And yeah, let me know down in the comments below if you need any sort of extra context on some of these teams. Maybe I glaze over something, or just, go through it too fast, or whatever the case may be. I'm happy to shed a little bit more light on the subject. So, first and foremost, we have my farming team. Obviously, I don't know, some of you might not know about this team yet. I did make a video on it back when I found it through, I want to say it was Cheekswa or somebody else. I can't remember exactly who had the original video for it. I want to say it was him, though. Basically, the idea here is that you use Liz to get a lot of ultimate move gauge, use Lostfane to copy the ultimate move gauge, use Brunhild to clear the stage, or the first two stages, and then once you go into the last stage with Dreyfus on the gold coin farming stage in Fort Solgris, Lostfane will basically just one-shot them with his ultimate. So very simple, very easy. There's a couple of weird things that can happen sometimes where it doesn't one-shot every single time, but once it gets back on track, it normally goes right back into the things. So I have two different event teams. These are normally just teams that I use to just randomly put whatever I need to on. I originally had this one titled to Final Boss because Final Bosses were pretty frequent from time to time, but it technically is just an event. So anytime there's an event that comes out that needs a team set, I'll just probably do it on this this second team right here, or depending on what I'm doing. I'll mess around with this one. I literally just used this one for Hell Belgius Guild Boss, so I didn't want to mess up my regular Belgius Guild Boss team, but speaking of that, going into the next one, we have Demons. Because I do have all of the New Year's units, there's also a Jericho, this one right here, and then there's also an Elizabeth, which is this one right here. They all have costumes that guarantee you a demon when you summon them, as long as you have them on the team. So this one guarantees, I want to say Howlix Demon, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I can just set whichever character I'm trying to guarantee demons for if I'm doing the old school demons, and then I can just summon a whole bunch of them at one time, guaranteed. I don't have to worry about any RNG there, so that's pretty much all this is for. I don't really use it all that often, because most of the time I do either OG or Belmoth, but it is what it is. I do have an Einik team set. Take a lot of these Guild Boss sets with a team, or teams with a grain of salt, because I just messed around with them and kind of reworked them. I've been trying to do research into what are the current teams that people are using for all of the Guild Bosses to try to get myself caught back up and maybe use a more efficient team with maybe a better way of actually getting good scores, so that way I don't have to run multiple difficulties or whatever the case may be. So this was the one that I found for Einik. So this one's pretty standard, actually. Well, I don't know, it's a little bit different. I wasn't using a full Goddess team last time Einik came around, but we'll see how this goes whenever he does come back around. Kelak is pretty much the same as it always has been, except I was using Red Gother here for rank ups, but I assume, from what I found, people are just using the Festival Gother for his Holy Relic attack-related stats, so that way Magilda can crit. Akumu also uses the exact same team as Einik, which I thought was kind of odd. I'm not exactly sure on that just yet, but normally for Akumu, I would use the normal human team. The Bond team works really well because it just gets a ton of HP, which ends up equating to a lot of score for Akumu for whatever reason. It's very like HP based. So the Goddess team does have a lot of synergy in that regard, so I'm assuming it's going to kind of work the same way, just build up a lot of passives, get a lot of basic stats, get a lot of health, win. Easy peasy. Belgius is also a very interesting one. I just swapped it over to this one. I'm still not entirely sure on this, but I'll use it as soon as the weekly reset happens. Typically, you don't want to use Goddess characters or Demon characters in Belgius, but this seems to be the one that people were using. as of 7 months ago. So a little outdated, but I'm assuming people are still using something similar to this. If not, I don't know, maybe I'll look into it a little bit more. But I don't know, if you have an interesting Belgia's team that's more up to date than this one, I would definitely be interested to see it. Normally I would use like Chad King, a Merlin, and then a Gother with Ludo CL link on him, so that way he doesn't get frozen when I rank up in the first couple of turns. But yeah, this was what I found. I haven't actually used it just yet, so I'm interested to see how that goes. I do have an SA Coin or Anvil Dungeon sort of farming team because I do have the red Liz that helps you with the time-limited dungeons. This is the team that I am currently using to farm it. Works pretty well. I'm pretty sure I've already made a guide up on about this on my channel as well. It's a pretty easy 2-turn team, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there's... It might be a 3-turn. I can't remember if the first phase has an extra character that comes down or not, just off the top of my head. But yeah, this is just the SA Coin Dungeon or Anvil Dungeon sort of team that I use to farm. Then we have the Fort Solgris farm team. This is the one that I use for skip tickets when I'm doing the event dungeon or the gold farming with skip tickets and stuff like that, so that way I can get my extra rewards. Basically, the way that it works is every single one of these characters is a Halloween character. Each one of them has a costume that will net you different rewards. So if we go to Gother, for example, 1 additional anvil as a set reward upon clearing Fort Solgris dungeon. I make sure he's first because anvils are most important. And then we have Meliodas, who has a 5-star Awakening Stone bonus. Then we have Elaine with a Vanya Ale bonus, and then lastly we have Gila with a Halloween box, but obviously this one is only during the Halloween stuff, so I just have her on the team more or less just to fit the Halloween aesthetic. But yeah, I have all of them with just a different grace on, which I thought was kind of funny because there are 4 different graces now. But yeah, those are my different adventurer teams. Deathmatch, I have went ahead and made all of the Hell and regular the exact same team, so that way I don't have to go through them. Honestly, it was kind of nice just updating some of these because I don't really typically run these anymore. Red Demon, I don't run basically ever. My box is all at least level 80 currently. I'm pushing them all up to 90 at the moment, so I don't really have much of a reason to even use Red Demons at all anymore. Plus, a lot of the times events already have Red Demon horns and, you know, the other demon materials in them as well, so I normally end up getting enough to where I don't have to run Red Demon anymore. Honestly, kind of nice, but this is like an updated sort of team on what I would use. Margaret is, you have to use blue units in this one if you're running it on Hell, so using a buffer to get more damage out, and then now that Roxy's out, I did put these two together because that honestly will just work really well to burst through it really, really quickly. Red Demon's really, really easy, so honestly the one ultimate can kind of take care of it on his own. Gray Demon team is still pretty standard. I was just thinking about it the other day on whether or not there is a new, like, updated green unit that you could use maybe instead of this Merlin, but I don't think that there is. I don't think that there's a newer, like, green sort of, like, one-shot kind of character that you could use in this scenario. I know if you're running this with a friend, you'll typically run, like, you'll run the Gother, and then the other person will run, like, a Hellbrum, the green Hellbrum, so that way you can get an attack-related stats boost. So you can kind of just one-shot both phases really easily. Nothing too crazy here. Hopefully they'll bring out maybe a new unit that could maybe double as a great, like, Gray Demon one-shotter, I guess. Not that this one's really bad or needs to be updated, potentially, but it could be kind of nice in the future. Hallex Demon, I basically run the exact same thing that I do on OG Demon, except for the fact that I use Escanor here, just because he has a lot of easy, like, damage output, whereas on OG Demon I use Trader Meliodas. So if you don't know, DN ranks up turn 1, I can then immediately upgrade into level 3s, pretty much just one-shot a bunch of the stuff. Surprisingly, on the last phase of Hallex, he's really, really tanky, so you don't necessarily one-shot him unless you get a lot of crits with Escanor, but pretty standard stuff here. If you don't know, this Elaine basically doubles, or not doubles, she increases buff potency basically by like 50% as long as it's a stat buff, I think. So increases allies' stat-related buffs by half of their value in Deathmatch. So really nice to have if you're using a really big buff team. Deanne puts on all basic stats and debuff immunity, so that's really helpful. Next up we have Belmoth. I actually I actually kind of hate running not Deanne, Derriere in this scenario. I would much rather run Zaratros, or Brunhild also works kind of nice sometimes. I'd rather run Zaratros if I'm being honest. But the reason why I run Derriere in this situation is purely because of her outfit, which gives me a random costume enhancement material box, which is just nice. It's just extra materials on top of, any time that I do this. And most of the time, each day, I'm farming Belmoth or OG Demon, so I guess I've got that going for me. I get some extra materials there. Pretty standard team. I can use Zaneri to cleanse, rank up, damage. It is what it is. Pretty standard stuff. OG Demon team is pretty standard as well. If I'm not using Gother, I'm running Freyr, so that way I can be, I guess, the damage dealer. I know some people do use the one Escanor on the team, but I just think that melee has a lot of good output. Even though Escanor is really nice to get through a little bit of extra damage on some of the damage cap phases, I'm still just, I guess, a traditionalist. I tend to use Trader Melee just because I'm already getting a lot of buffs from Deanne, and it's just really quick and easy, so it doesn't really matter too much, I guess. Right now there is Lamech. I'm not going to go over that because it's an event kind of thing. Fight Festival teams. I do really enjoy using demons. That's if I wasn't a YouTuber and using more variety stuff, I would be running demons probably all the time. But yeah, I made you a little nice half blue, half pink team for the friendly matches. Last up, we have Brawl. I run an Angel team with Athena in the back for ultimate move gauge removal. And then on the second team, I run a sort of human team with some damage increase with Easton in the back for damage or ultimate move gauge removal, because if you're unaware, people use a lot of Fraudrins and Suicide Lizzes in Brawl to make sure that they can just ult one-shot you. So these kind of help in that regard. And then the last team is Demons, just because they have really high CC and they do a lot of damage. So whatever their strongest team is, I normally just pit this against it and hope to win, as long as it's not like an ultimate gauge or a rush team, you know what I mean? So that's pretty much what I'm working with. It took me roughly 11 minutes, a little over 11 minutes to do this. So yeah, as soon as I get word from the guy running the whale account, I will hop over and sort of look at what he's got. So I'll be back in just a moment. Alrighty, so here we are on Gaijin's account, and yeah, let's take a look at the teams. I'm pretty interested. Obviously, like I said, there's not going to be as much context here, so his first one is titled Anvils. I can only assume it's for the Anvil dungeon from the time-limited dungeons. Seems like a pretty interesting team, a lot of damage output and everything. Not using the Liz is kind of interesting for the backline. We have farms. Okay, going for an unknown farm team is pretty standard, I think, in some ways. What card set are you using? Increases allies' damage dealt to enemies by 5%. Okay, pretty typical, I guess. I don't know if I would necessarily use that. I think I would. I think I would rather use just regular cards, in my opinion. But interesting to see that it's an unknown farm team. Obviously, very AOE heavy, except for the Philo card, which I don't know if that hinders it by much. Okay, hearts. I think this one's pretty typical. I think this is just for farming affection. I would assume that his hearts, his affection on Escanor, King, Merlin, and Liz are probably not full if I had to guess. So his King is... his Elizabeth is not... Which, I don't know if Liz uses a different one. Escanor's also full. I don't know, maybe this one's just not as updated, potentially. Gold. Okay, so this one is like a gold farming team. I wonder what this one is used to farm then. Maybe just like books and other stuff, because the gold farming team doesn't typically translate over to other activities as well. It's literally just designed for that specific set of stages. Okay, so we have, I'm assuming, Final Boss, which is pretty standard. It looks like just high damage output for maybe farming Final Boss, whichever one was last. I honestly don't remember at this point. I think it was one of the easier ones. Belgius, which is very interesting team here. Not used to seeing something like this. Einik, which is kind of sort of standard. The Nanashi and the Brunhild are interesting to me, but I don't know how often. I don't really understand too much about high level like guild gameplay, so I don't know how often they even need to push. I know that there are push weeks. I would imagine they probably come up with a strategy in the higher tier guilds and just all kind of mess around with those. Kalak looks like what I just had, basically, Final Boss farm team. Okay, so this is not the same as the other final boss team, maybe, but I'm not exactly sure. Kind of just a weird one, I guess. And then this one just says humans, but there are no humans on this team, which is very bizarre to me. Okay. Going to death matches, we have a red demon team. He does have different teams for hell and non-hell. Obviously, I think he's kind of in the same boat I'm in, where you don't really run Red Demon anymore, so these are pretty outdated, using the 1 Escanor and everything. Very standard team when it comes to Grey Demon, of course, same as I was using. Howlix is basically the same. He's using Trader Melly instead, which I think is fair because this team uses a lot of buffs. And then the regular one has Lost Vein on it, which is really funny to me. Belmoth, he's using the same thing as I am, except for in Hell difficulty, he uses Kane, which is very funny to me. I guess because he's not running Zenarian Thonar, maybe. And then OG Demon, he is running the damage variant of the same team that I use. So he is not using the Gother rank up. He's going for damage output instead, which is pretty standard. And then, of course, there's the Lamech one on the end. PvP, he has a demon team set. And then I think this is the same team that I was using the last time that I played. So this is just like an insanely high CC team, of course, and then friendly match is just catastrophes, actually, which is kind of interesting. Brawl Team is an unknown team with Nanashi. Okay, kind of an interesting team here. Gerard does the same thing that running Athena or the Halloween Easton would do, except she's just more universal than Easton, just like Athena is because of her Holy Relic. So kind of just like an ult rush counter team here, and then on the end he has demons with more of an aggressive demon team. So kind of interesting there. His CC is a little different on that, which I think because it says down right here, that means that the gears kind of swapped up at the moment. So very interesting to see sort of how it differs in some ways, and it's the same in other ways. Obviously, there are some teams that are a lot more optimized for certain content, so there's not really as much room for variety, I guess, which you don't necessarily have to run the most meta thing you've ever seen necessarily, but yeah, definitely something that I was kind of interested to see on like what he used for different things, what he had them titled as, different stuff. Obviously, there's probably some context missing there for some of those, but yeah, it was in some ways what I was expecting, but in other ways it wasn't, which was definitely kind of cool to sort of get some insight on. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this was kind of interesting, a little bit more of a different video, no action or anything like that, but I thought it would be kind of cool just to look at the sort of ins and outs of the stuff that you kind of use on your day-to-day grind in Grand Cross. So yeah, that's basically it. Feel free to subscribe, all that good stuff, and yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.